Chapter 13. Do something different to get something different. I can't count how many times that I switched up the scope of what I was doing. Maybe it's because I have self-diagnosed ADD, who knows. But along my journey, whenever I would get a feeling that I'm wasting my time and doing a certain thing from a certain angle, I'd switch it up without hesitation. I don't mean that I would go from one extreme to another all the time, but in some cases I do, but I'm referring to just slightly tilting the direction. Like for me, when I started out in video production, I was going with what I liked at the time, which was creating music videos and hip hop content for people. But over time, I decided that I didn't like certain things about that genre of work, and I decided to switch it up. I then switched my efforts and aim towards weddings. Then I started doing a lot of events. Then I started creating advertisements for businesses, and so on. The point I'm making is that throughout my journey, one thing I know I'm going to do is grow. And growth is different. When you grow, you're no longer the same person anymore, physically and mentally. So you can't prepare for growth like that. You just have to go with what you see is going to be more beneficial and make the best educated guess that you can. This doesn't just apply to people like me who offer a service and can switch it up at any moment. It applies to every person who is running a business. If you run a store of any kind, you have to know what products are moving off the shelf. If they aren't moving off the shelf, then you figure out why. And then even make sure that the product deserves to be on the shelf at all. No matter what form of business you're in, you have to constantly do something different to get something different. That's growth. The quote unquote different that you get out of doing something new is growth, better direction, and more sales and clients. That's what we want, right? I'm sure nobody is getting into business just for the lifestyle. Here's a story of the first major thing I had to do to get something different. When I first left my job, I left so I could do one thing at that time: video marketing and production. A big part of me knew that I was going to be more than just a video guy, but I couldn't focus on the many different things that I wanted to do because I knew that it would become too overwhelming. I kept all the things that I wanted to do in the back of my head, so when the opportunities presented themselves, I ain't have to get ready because I stayed ready. Cliche, but true. The first opportunity to do something different for me was in December of 2016. I'm living in Raleigh, North Carolina at the time. To take a step back for you, remember I said that I was living in Greensboro, North Carolina when I quit my job in May of that same year, right? So in the matter of that short amount of time, I already had to move cities. And relocating isn't hard if you don't have much to relocate with. But when you have a lot of things, it's expensive. And also, it was abrupt, so it shook everything up in my world. It's May 13th, 2016. I'm currently living in the northern part of Greensboro, and I'm a fresh new entrepreneur ready to hit the streets in the city, which I lived in for like the past 10 years at that point. Greensboro is where I ended up at when I left Goldsboro, North Carolina to go to college at North Carolina A&T. So on May 13th, I quit, and I'm already out and running. Like the first month that I quit, I think I made around like $5,000. I got a big portion of that through a connect I made through my girlfriend, Danielle. By the way, this may be the first time I'm using her name, but Danielle is my wife now. We're going strong about 4+ years now. Today, as I'm writing this, she just texted me, "Happy 3-month anniversary," as a married couple. So my wife Danielle is a doctor, by the way. Not a medical doctor, but she has a PhD. She's in the counseling field, where she was attending North Carolina A&T as well to get her doctorate. So she connected me with a professor by the name of Pam in her program. Pam hired me to create a random piece of video content for her, and the dean of the school walks by while I'm doing it. Pam introduces us, and that was that. Of course, we exchanged business cards, and he left out the room and continued on about his day. I finished shooting with Pam, and then I go home. I messaged the dean via email, and we established a relationship. Not too long after that, I ended up negotiating my first contract as a new entrepreneur. I remember it was all so new, like the whole process. Up until that point, I might have signed some random wedding contracts that I created for clients, but not like this project. This one was super official. I had to go and create all the legit documents that they needed. When working with a corporation or big company, and in this case a university, there's going to be a lot of contractual documents that will be needed. It's funny how I was ill prepared for all of this. I needed all types of documents to pass the red tape. I wasn't caught off guard by knowledge any. I knew what all these documents were. I just never actually had to prepare them. So I got it all to go through, and the school wrote me my first official check for $3.5K. I was like, wow, first month out, and I already made more money than I was making at my old job, just in a couple of weeks. That feeling was surreal. I felt like I was literally about to take over the world. I had money saved up already, and I just added $3,500 to my bank account in one check. I also had a few other small deals going on that totaled up about a couple thousand more dollars. And what was actually dope was the check for $3,500 that I got, it was from my alma mater. I went to that school as an undergraduate student, and the way it came back full circle to where they were paying me now, that was actually really cool. So at this time, I have more money than I ever had at this point. I never had 5 digits in my bank account ever. The thoughts I had in my head were such a high. But quickly, real quickly, God made a hard right turn come. It was about 1 month and 2 weeks that went by, and something unthinkable happened. My girlfriend's father passed away. He had a surgery, and when they released him to go home, some complications happened, and he passed away. I remember it like yesterday too, man. I was in my office doing some work. Danielle was back home in Raleigh, North Carolina with her father and the rest of the family. I couldn't make it. I was super busy with everything I had going on and simply didn't choose to make the time to get up there. I think I actually had planned on coming in a few days once the weekend came, I think. When I got the news of his death, I was sitting at my desk and Danielle calls me. I immediately knew something was wrong as soon as I heard the first sound that came out of her mouth. She began frantically telling me that her dad was laying on the ground and that her dad was not responding. Her whole family was in the living room at this time, including his brother and his wife, and maybe some other people. So of course, I dropped everything I was doing, packed a bag, and took me and my dog to Raleigh. I remember contacting all the company owners I was working with and letting them know that this unforeseen circumstances happened. And actually, though, they were very happy to work with me even through these life changes that we were enduring. So the result of losing Danielle's father was that we were going to have to move to Raleigh, North Carolina. I just had to roll with it. I chose to be with her and support her through this situation that neither one of us had an idea would happen so soon, or ever. After her father's death and we're trying to make it through it all, I remember my dad telling me, "Son, you're at a crossroads. You can get out now and your life may be a lot simpler. Or you can stay and deal with everything you guys are going to go through." He indicated that in no way can he make the decision for me, but he wanted me to be aware of this fork in the road that had suddenly approached. I chose to stay with her, to support her through this situation, as I was 100% sure that if the shoe was on the other foot, she'd do the same. The reason why we had to move to Raleigh was because Danielle was now responsible for 2 family members that were not fully capable of living alone. Her dad was holding everything together in his home, and now that he wasn't there, she was up at bat. It was her responsibility. Do you see the implication of the different complication my dad was referring to now? So the end result at this time, we moved into her parents' house so that we can make it all work. I'm like 29 years old at this time. I'm in grad school and I work for myself. I also had intentions on marrying my girlfriend. We moved out of our house in Greensboro, North Carolina and into her parents' house so that we can figure this thing out. So for like 2, maybe 3 months, we still had to pay the rent at our old home. We didn't move all of our stuff, just our clothes and everyday stuff so that we can make the transition there first without actually moving everything we have since it was such a fast move. I was actually driving back and forth from Raleigh to Greensboro at the time so that I could handle the business that I had started. Everything goes well with our initial move. I'm in Raleigh and I'm already out here pounding the pavement and making connections. Things seem like they're actually going to work. Although everything I had initially planned to do in Greensboro immediately ended, I still could take the same concepts and move them to Raleigh. I actually kind of liked the thought of it because Raleigh was a much bigger city than Greensboro, with way more opportunities. And yes, it worked for us too because we weren't going to be paying as much rent as we were living in our own house. In which it's not like we planned this out, so it was kind of like a benefit that was well deserved provided the situation. So we're there and we're making it happen. We have in-house nursing set up. We have video cameras set up so that Danielle could monitor and ensure that everything is working properly. I was even taking care of the yard. I mean, we really adjusted and did a straight Allen Iverson crossover to a new life. We did it. Or so we thought. So when someone dies, quite naturally, there are going to be people that come around and get involved in the household for their own selfish reasons. I won't go into the exact situation because even though I completely despise the people I'm referencing, not to mention with all the parameters of rightly so, I still respect their privacy. And you know what? They completely invaded mine in the whole ordeal that happened. But that gives me no reason to stoop down to their level. So back to their involvement. The types of things people come around for after death usually is money, property, or some other type of beneficial item. There was a very small group of people on her mom's side of the family that thought otherwise about everything Danielle and I were doing. I mean, I'm not even going to begin to open the big ass can of worms that would spill the detail of everything they were doing to me, to us, and to Danielle's family. But I will say this. It involved police, judges, court, theft, other government agencies, lying, and blatant lying, etc., etc. Needless to say, when these problems started to surface, I immediately moved out of that house. I was there like maybe 3 weeks. I remember something happened and both Danielle and I knew that I couldn't stay there past that exact point. So again, after we all had it figured out, we had to change up again. Now, not only did we have to move to Raleigh unexpectedly, but now we had to move into our own house. We had 3 cars, a dog, enough stuff to fill up a 2,000 square foot house, and a boat. Side note, speaking of doing something different to get something different, your boy had a boat. I was the only one that I personally knew in my circle that had a boat. I did it just to get a relaxing feeling that I got from the vibes of lake chilling on a cool day. I had money saved up and still had some left to survive, so I could still be out here chasing my dreams. But what happened on Danielle's end was more tough than I ever seen anybody go through. She was getting her PhD, commuting back and forth between Raleigh and Greensboro, caring for her family, and still managing to work 2 jobs. But with all this going on, Danielle couldn't afford to pay anything or as much as she used to towards our own house bills. She was able to help a little bit, but she was spending so much in commuting, out-of-pocket expenses for family, and other things. So I no longer had a financial partner in my household. And I understood it though. She was doing everything she could, but we were dealt a set of cards that were pretty much the worst anybody can have. It's now September 2016. I'm in my house in Raleigh and I started to realize that in a short amount of time, all my money I had saved up was about to run out. My brother Alex lends me about $2,000 to help me out. That $2K was gone so fast that it only provided me like 2 weeks of release of pressure that I was feeling. I was not used to paying everything myself for 2 people. I had to pay my bills along with our house bills. My personal bills were about $2,000, maybe a little over that by themselves, which included my portion of what I usually paid in our household. See, fortunately enough for me, my wife will always be able to bring a decent amount to the table. She's a hustler just like me. She has a doctorate, I have my master's, and we both grind harder than anyone we know. However, at this specific time in life, I had to pay her portion of what she usually paid towards our bills, which was furniture, rent, utilities, cable, internet, and so on. That made my bills go up by a significant amount. Sometimes I even had to help pay her car note, which isn't cheap as well, $450. So it's September, and my brother loans me some money to help me get through. I was managing to scrape up any small jobs that I could to make money. That got me through October and some of November. But by the end of November or early December, I caught myself about to go into the red again. I just simply couldn't handle paying about $3,000 or maybe more in bills and expenses. So I reached a point where something had to change, and it had to happen now, or we were soon going to be evicted. The thoughts that were going through my head at the time was so much pressure, I'm surprised a diamond didn't pop out my ass. A couple of weeks go by, and I still didn't know what to do. I was so lost at the time that I can't even remember what I was doing. I was only bringing in about like $1,500 or $1,800 at the time, if that. I was depressed. I'm going to go through my depression in my next chapter, but God decided that it was time to bring in the first literal moment that saved my life. I mean, that literally saved my life. When I say quote unquote life, I'm referencing my entrepreneurial journey. I'm sure that I would have made it by going back to get a regular 9-to-5 job, but what I don't know is who I would have become by going back to work. Would I eventually pull it back together and hop right out like I never left? Probably so. Or maybe not. Would I have become some bitter guy telling other people that entrepreneurship isn't everything it's cracked up to be? Very possible as well. Or maybe I would have become a total loser and killed any of the thoughts that I had and just settled to work with some bullshit job and just die inside. That's very possible too. Either way, I know that God interfered at this moment because I was about to go through a personal hell that I didn't deserve. God knew that I wanted to eventually affect others and help others, period. So that's one of the reasons why I'm writing this book, because I'm doing what I asked for, along with what God has planned for me and how I'm going to impact His kingdom. So when God interfered and took the wheel, I remember it like yesterday. I was on the phone with a now very good friend by the name of Chaz Reed. He's another fellow videographer that I met through a mutual friend, Wilt. Chaz is one of those great people that you want to keep around. We aren't like best buds or nothing, but every time we talk, it's super positive. Not to mention that we throw each other business and contacts any chance we get. But I think he's actually giving me more business than I have for him. Thanks, Chaz. Like I said, I'm on the phone with him and I let him know that I was about to go broke. I remember he said, "Hey B, I don't know if you want to do it, but I just started driving for Uber. That's definitely something you can do." That's all it took for me. Simple words from a trusted source who sincerely wanted me to make it. Chaz, God used you in that moment. It was because you were so sincere in your thoughts of helping me. I am forever indebted to your sincerity. Thank you, my brother. Plug. If you haven't heard of it by now, I'm going to have a book that I'm releasing along with this one that will be named How Ride Sharing Saved My Life. If it's not the exact same name, it'll be very related. So the point of this whole story I just illustrated is that it was a defining moment in my life that allowed me to do something different to get something different. In this case, it was something different from a micro standpoint of doing something that I originally didn't know I will be doing. But from a macro level, I was doing something different to get the same thing, which was to stay an entrepreneur. I always tell people that before anything or any title, I am an entrepreneur. So all the different things that I try out on my journey are for the macro purpose of remaining just that, a full-time boss. See, here's a moment that I can let you know from my own shoes that you don't necessarily know how you're going to make it along your journey. There's going to come times that will seem divine once you really look back and understand what happened. For me, if it wasn't for this specific friend at a specific time on a specific phone call, then I could have been swayed in any direction at that moment. Meaning if the right person told me the wrong thing, I could have had influence that could possibly sent me the wrong way.